There is a figure standing at the threshold of every great biblical catastrophe, not watching, not waiting, acting. When the firstborn of Egypt fell in a single night, he was there. When the armies of Sennacherib, 185,000 soldiers, collapsed before the walls of Jerusalem without a single Hebrew sword being drawn, he was there. When the adversary stood before the throne of God to accuse the righteous man Job, it was this same figure who held the boundary between accusation and destruction. His name appears only 3 times in the canonical Hebrew scriptures, yet the ancient world knew him in extraordinary detail. His face, his fire, his voice, his weapons, and the overwhelming terror that even the holiest of men could not endure when he drew near. He is Michael, the Archangel, the Prince of Israel, the commander of the host of heaven. And the question the ancient texts force us to ask, the question that changes everything about how we understand divine power, is this: what does it actually mean that God's greatest warrior is also the angel of death? And what does his true appearance, preserved in texts sealed for centuries, reveal about the nature of divine mercy itself? Welcome to Bible Secrets, Hidden History. Before we unlock these ancient archives, consider subscribing, so the next sealed vault finds you waiting. Chapter 1: The Mystery. What the ancient world actually believed about Michael. Most who hear the name Michael picture a Renaissance painting. A beautiful youth in gleaming armor, 1 foot pressed upon a serpent, a sword raised in triumph. Peaceful, ordered, almost decorative. The ancient texts describe something altogether different. Begin with the canonical record. Michael appears by name in the book of Daniel, and the context is war. In Daniel chapter 10, verses 13 and 21, he is called one of the chief princes who came to the aid of a divine messenger, fighting a 21-day celestial battle against the prince of Persia, a being of such power that the messenger could not prevail alone. Michael is the reinforcement sent when the battle exceeds the capacity of angels of lesser rank. Then in Daniel chapter 12, verse 1, his title shifts entirely. At that time, Michael, the great prince who protects your people, will arise. There will be a time of distress such as has not happened from the beginning of nations until then. The great prince, the one who arises at the moment of maximum catastrophe. In the New Testament, the letter of Jude, verse 9, preserves a fragment of a tradition far older than itself. Michael in direct dispute with the adversary over the body of Moses. This single verse implies an entire theology, that even in death, the righteous are contested, and that Michael stands as advocate and guardian at that final threshold. In Revelation chapter 12, verses 7 through 9, he leads the war in heaven that casts the dragon and his angels into the earth. But the canonical texts give us only the outline. The ancient world had access to a far more detailed portrait. The Hebrew name Michael is not a title. It is a question, composed of 3 elements: emietzi, who, ka, a particle of comparison meaning like or as, and el, the name of God. The full meaning, who is like God. It is a rhetorical battle cry, not a personal designation. Every time his name is spoken, it is a declaration that nothing in existence compares to the divine. The name itself is an act of warfare against pride, against the rebellion that began when one bright being decided he would be like the Most High. Michael's very existence is the answer to Lucifer's question. This is not coincidence. In the architecture of Hebrew sacred language, names are not labels. They are thrones. They are missions inscribed before birth. The seeker who looks closely enough will see that Michael's name was the first weapon drawn in the war of heaven, spoken before a single wing moved, before a single flame was kindled. Chapter 2, the Revelation. What sealed texts say he actually looks like. The texts that describe Michael's appearance were not lost. They were set aside, preserved in the libraries of the ancient world, copied by careful hands in Aramaic, Ethiopic, Greek, and Slavonic, and largely excluded from the canonical Bible, not because they were considered false, but because they were considered overwhelming. Too much, too vast for ordinary instruction. The Book of Enoch, First Enoch, the oldest sections of which predate the birth of Christ by at least 3 centuries, found among the Dead Sea Scrolls at Qumran in 1947 in multiple copies, confirming its authority within the ancient community at the very edge of the canonical world, names Michael as one of the 4 presences who stand before the throne. In chapter 9, Enoch names him among those who look down from the sanctuary of heaven and observe the suffering of the earth. In chapter 20, Michael is designated as the angel set over the best part of mankind and over chaos. Over chaos. This is not a guardian of tidiness. He is the ordered force imposed upon disorder itself. The most detailed physical description of Michael in any surviving ancient text is found in the Testament of Abraham, a Jewish pseudepigraphical text preserved in Greek manuscripts, likely composed between the 1st century BCE and the 2nd century CE, and transmitted through both Jewish and Christian communities. In this text, the patriarch Abraham is visited by Michael before his death, and the description is precise and deliberate. Michael arrives in the appearance of a commander. The Greek word used is strategos, the highest military rank in the Hellenistic world. His face shines like the sun. He wears a robe of purple and gold. But most striking is what the text says Abraham cannot do. He cannot look at Michael's face directly and comprehend what he is seeing, not because Michael is horrifying, but because the concentration of divine authority in his form exceeds the human capacity to hold. The 2 Enoch, the Slavonic Enoch, preserved in Old Church Slavonic manuscripts and believed to contain traditions of great antiquity, describes the archangels who stand before the throne as beings of fire, who hold no fixed form, who move between states of matter and light, and whose voices, when raised, shake the fabric of created space. The Apocalypse of Moses, also called the Life of Adam and Eve, a text found in multiple manuscript traditions across the ancient world, describes Michael at the death of Adam as arriving with a host of angels so radiant that even Eve, who had once walked in Eden and knew the presence of God, fell to the earth and could not rise. These are not decorative beings. They are instruments of divine will in forms that the human nervous system was not constructed to endure without assistance. And Michael, among all of them, is described again and again by a single consistent word. First. First in rank, first in power. First to act, first to stand. The commander. But here is what the ancient texts reveal in their final account, and it changes everything we thought we understood about why Michael is called both the warrior and the angel of death, and what that combination means for every soul that has ever faced its darkest hour. Chapter 3. The meaning, why the commander of death is also the guardian of the living. The connection between Michael and death is not incidental. It is the center of his sacred function. In the Midrash, the great body of rabbinic commentary and tradition that preserved ancient Jewish interpretation across generations, Michael is explicitly named as the angel who accompanied the soul of Moses into the divine presence. The dispute referenced in Jude chapter 9 is elaborated across multiple rabbinic sources. The adversary claimed Moses' soul on the grounds of his failures. Michael argued his righteousness, and the tradition is unanimous. Michael did not argue with his own authority. He said simply, "The Lord rebuke you. Not my power, not my judgment, the Lord's." This is the key that unlocks the apparent paradox. Michael does not bring death. He escorts the righteous through it. He is the commander of the passage, not the author of the ending. The armies of death that he leads are not instruments of divine cruelty. They are the forces that maintain the boundary between what is sacred and what seeks to devour it, between the righteous soul and the powers that would contest its passage. The seeker who has sat beside a dying person and felt in that room something present that could not be explained. The seeker who has felt in that moment not horror, but a strange and overwhelming peace, has perhaps encountered the edge of this reality, not the darkness of death, the order that holds the darkness back. This is what the ancient texts, taken together, build toward. Michael's terrifying appearance, the face like the sun, the robe of divine authority, the voice that shakes created space, is not the appearance of destruction. It is the appearance of protection rendered in its purest, most concentrated form. Power so complete that nothing opposed to life and righteousness can remain in its presence. In the book of Revelation, when Michael's war in heaven concludes and the dragon is cast down, the voice from heaven does not say, "The enemy is destroyed." It says in chapter 12, verse 10, "Now have come the salvation, and the power, and the kingdom of our God, and the authority of his Messiah." Michael's victory is not narrated as a military triumph. It is narrated as the arrival of salvation. The war clears the space. The salvation fills it. This is the architecture of divine purpose that the ancient world understood, and that the modern world, in its hunger for simple answers, has largely forgotten. The commander of death is simultaneously the herald of salvation, because death, in the sacred record, was never the final word. It was always the doorway. And who better to guard a doorway than the one whose very name is a declaration, carved into the structure of sacred language before the foundations of the world, that nothing in all of created existence compares to the God who waits on the other side. The seeker who wrestles with fear today, fear of endings, fear of loss, fear of what cannot be controlled, is being asked by texts 2,000 and 3,000 years old to consider the possibility that the most fearsome force in the divine order exists not to destroy them, but to stand between them and everything that would. Conclusion. The ancient texts answer the mystery directly. Michael's terrifying appearance and his dominion over death are not contradictions. They are the two faces of the same sacred function, the power of divine protection made visible in its fullest, most overwhelming form. The question this ancient truth asks of every seeker is a quiet one, and it deserves a quiet moment. In the hours when the darkness feels closest, when loss arrives, when certainty fails, when the passage ahead seems unknowable, what do you believe stands at the threshold with you? The ancient record, preserved across centuries and civilizations, in scrolls found in desert caves and manuscripts copied by trembling hands, says the answer is not silence and not chaos. It says the answer is a name that is itself a question. Who is like God? And the answer to that question, whispered back across the millennia, is the foundation on which every act of courage, every step of faith, every crossing of the threshold has ever rested. You are not alone at the door. You never were. And whatever waits beyond it was prepared in the divine architecture of things long before you arrived. The archives of hidden history are vast. The next chapter awaits. The ancient texts that describe Michael are only the beginning of what the sacred record preserved about the structure of the divine order. And in the vaults yet to be opened, the architecture grows stranger, deeper, and more luminous than most have been permitted to see. This has been Bible Secrets, Hidden History. The truth does not decay. It only waits